13th Avenue. And the owners would like to turn this into an art gallery. Planning Commission had a look at this and think that is very good and conducive with the area. There are some other business opportunities that in fact spill over across 13th Avenue to some of the side streets. This one would be one house in. There is parking that is associated with this building, and we feel that with what is being offered here, a small art gallery, and by the way, the family is new to us from China and would like to set up shop here. We think this is a good idea and would like to see this go through.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Comments or questions on the report? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor O'Donnell?
Each of the houses in a row had a laneway suite on them. This one is a little bit different in that we looked at this as, first of all, it was a proposal, and what is different about this one is that they would not be one after another, but in fact it would skip a house or two where there would be a laneway suite. The difference here is that this may be more applicable to a situation that could arise in our current city, in the inner part of our city, where there could be the occasional laneway suite that would be developed. So the notion here is to try this and see how it works, and then this would be the end of the pilot projects. We would come back with an evaluation to see if this is something that we would want to do again. So of course the notion here is that if we add a laneway suite, that we in fact are adding more opportunity for people to live in a smaller area, and we can create rental situations or help with family dynamics. So that is one of the circumstances. I do have one question to the administration on this. It's based on the map, and it's based on the T intersections that are possible in both 62 and 63, which I'm just referring to the map. Has that been covered with our administration in terms of garbage collection, et cetera, and is there enough turning? I note that in the alley as it comes to a turn, there are angles there that are built in, so I'd like some clarity on that if I could, please.
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, I might ask Mr. Brown to speak to that from a utility servicing perspective.
Mr. Brown?
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Worship, yes, it would have been reviewed as part of our review of this proposed product, and as well as in the subdivision review. Typically, when the corner cutoffs are required, we also require that the corners, in fact, be paved as well, too, so it maintains that continuity of those corner cutoffs, so that services like garbage collection do have the ability to make those turns.
Perfect. I just want to make sure that that was clear. And I'll leave this for now, and I reserve the right to close debate, please.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Other comments or questions on this? Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions for the administration and then some comments. The first question is, as I read the map, the laneway suites in the lane behind James Hill Row are contiguous. That they follow 1 to 7 and then 1 to 7 again. Am I reading that map correctly?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, yes, that is correct.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The second question relates to the school. I noticed that the Public School Board wrote expressing concern. I'm wondering what the administration's position is with respect to the concern that the Public School Board indicated vis-a-vis parking and congestion.
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, again, that parking was reviewed by our transportation engineers, and I might defer to Mr. Brown to elaborate upon that, please.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Worship. Again, through you, parking was reviewed. We do expect that because of the laneway product, McCoggy Street will receive a bit of a higher percentage of parking on that local street itself. That being said, it is a local street with an 8.7 meter width and parking on one side. Just being the difference being that there would be probably a little more at capacity on this particular row because of the laneway product. So it'd be part of that laneway product evaluation that we'll be looking at in terms of how it functions.
Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to begin by saying that I understand the need for increased density in the city, and I also want to say that I, in general, support laneway suites, and I'm pleased that there's pilot projects proposed for laneway suites. That said, I think that this is the wrong neighborhood in which to experiment with this, and the wrong type of experiment, and I want to say so for two reasons. First involves density. If you wanted to cram one more house into Harbour Landing, you'd need a shoehorn and a pound of butter. This is just a situation in which houses are very, very tightly placed together. It's not a case where density, we need to increase density. The density is already there, and I believe that the 20 extra laneway suites exaggerates that density beyond the breaking point. Indeed, I believe that it threatens the neighborhood. And I note the following. First of all, with respect to the school, one of the problems we have in Harbour Landing is that the community amenities that normally you think of in terms of a neighborhood just aren't there yet. Right now, there's absolutely no place in which you can have a public meeting, in which you can hold a polling booth. That school construction will remedy that, but that's going to be a very congested, very busy school. And I think these laneway suites close to that school pose a problem, and I can well understand why the school board expressed concern. And the concern, I think, is more with respect to James Hill Road than anywhere else. So I think that there's a real congestion problem there. I also think that there's a problem with the fact that the setbacks in the lane are being reduced by down to 1.5 instead of 2.5 meters. It's going to be a very congested neighborhood, and I think that this, for that reason alone, is not the place to experiment with the laneway suites, which I notice for the most part, for 14 out of 20, are contiguous. I also want to say that I think that the pilot projects should be placed in an area where they're given their best chance of success, and I don't think that that's it. So both because I think this neighborhood is already extremely dense, this is the wrong place to run a pilot project, but also because I think that the neighborhood itself will not accommodate well these neighborhood suites. I'd like to see this pilot project tried elsewhere. I want to just make one other point. There was no public consultation with respect to this because there really could be no public consultation. The neighborhood right now, the immediate neighborhood in which these houses and suites would be built is vacant. There are lots of housing around, but they're just too far away for the consultation parameter. It means that I don't think there's been any proper public input into this, including from the councillor up until now. And I take with the exception of the school criticism, which I take seriously, I am very concerned that this is too much density in this area and not the proper place for this pilot project. So I'm opposed to this, Mr. Mayor. What I'd like to suggest is that this be tabled and referred back to the Mayor's Housing Commission, because I think the Mayor's Housing Commission should look seriously at the criteria we have for pilot projects and neighborhood suites. In general, I think we need better definition of the number of neighborhood suites that constitute a pilot project, the type of neighborhood suites, the criteria used for selecting a pilot project, and the evaluation to eventually be used in evaluating the pilot projects for neighborhood suites. But in terms of this particular pilot project, I'm convinced it's wrong. It's wrong both for piloting neighborhood suites, and it's wrong in terms of the neighborhood and the density of Harbour Landing. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that this matter be tabled and the reference be made to the Mayor's Housing Commission to receive input from the administration on how pilot projects are to be conducted for neighborhood suites.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. The motion is referral and is not debatable. We understand what's being asked here to refer this report to the Housing Commission. If we're all clear this on the motion for referral, all those in favor? Hands up again, please. All those against? Motion's carried. Should be referred to the next meeting of the Housing Commission. Move on to CR 14-2. Councillor O'Donnell.
Planning Commission again, this is an application of the zoning bylaw amendment, road closure, portion of north-south lane between Albert Street and Angus Street, 600 Albert Street specifically. You've never been down Albert Street, this is right along the CN tracks, so there's a rental business that's right there. We didn't feel that this was a problem at all in terms of where traffic goes or doesn't go in this area. So we seek for approval.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Questions or comments on this report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. City Manager's Report, CM 14-1. Councillor O'Donnell.
The title on this one is External Financing, 100 million RRI Stadium Project. The recommendation for this is a receive and file. My intention is to bring this to the floor for debate. I would like to save my comments for the end, please.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fraser, would you mind taking the chair, please?
Mr. Mayor, just before your comments, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Burnett, thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a couple of questions of the administration, then I'll have some comments. Let's start by saying this, of course, is not unexpected. We did expect to see this report come forward since this council and the province and the Rough Riders came to an agreement on the funding to a new stadium. And the last element in place for the funding mechanism, of course, is the $100 million of debt that we will be seeing through to tonight with the province of Saskatchewan. So we had approved this actually back in January 13th. We actually approved the funding model, so this is not a surprise. And back in November 2013, we actually instructed the city manager, who I'm going to be speaking some questions in a moment, to pursue external financing and come back to council when he felt that it was time to come back for this council to approve that. So I have a question of the administration on this. By going out and having the administration determine the best time, that is to say the best interest rate, the best opportunity, I'd like to get the administration's perspective on how that works. And secondarily, it's a delegated authority to do this, and actually it's council making the decision tonight as opposed to the administration. Just to clarify on those points.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. In response, of course, as noted, I was instructed in my position to move this process forward based on council's direction, and this loan itself is in partnership, done in partnership with the province, and so we have engaged with the province, and as noted, have monitored the markets to understand what is available out there over the course of the last year or so. The markets have fluctuated in terms of rates available to us, so we've stayed in close connection there, and so essentially move forward to determine the right point in time based on what would be most favorable from the city's perspective in terms of a rate, and obviously then as well followed. There's a relatively prescriptive process that we need to follow, basically laid out by the Cities Act, and a number of steps along the way, including public notice. So that has been done to identify that this item is coming forward and being considered. As noted, it has been publicly known for quite some time, and so we've undertaken all those processes. As the mayor has noted, from an administrative standpoint, we have no ability to commit the city or council to this loan. What's required to do that is for city council to pass a bylaw. So that's on the agenda, obviously, later this evening. But I've acted on your behalf to try and determine proper timing and best rates and the proper follow the proper process to be able to get us to this point.
So, Deputy Mayor, to the administration, we're not delegating the authority at all to seek the loan out. We're actually asking the administration to prepare for us to make that decision ourselves, which we'll be doing tonight. Because council does not go to the market ourselves to say, can we find the best interest rate possible? That's not what our job is. We actually have that function done by the administration. Is that a clear way to say that through Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, that is correct. The city does not have the ability to actually execute on this loan unless City Council passes the bylaw this evening or at a later date. But we can't actually enter into the final arrangements for the loan until a bylaw has been passed by City Council.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I want to talk a bit about the terms of the debenture, and it is actually through the Saskatchewan Municipal Financing Corporation, which can have a better chance of getting a better interest rate. It's for 31 and a half years at 3.99%. And I'd like to ask the administration the perspective on that interest rate, which is slightly a difference what we thought it might have been. And of course, the interest rate is about $2.8 million annually or semi-annually. Just a discussion of the terms as provided for in the discussion section of the report.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, so in terms of the terms, as noted, it is a 31-and-a-half-year term at 3.99%. Of course, the city has no control over the rate itself. The market sets the rate, and we work with advisors, obviously, to understand the willingness of the market to enter into this type of an arrangement, and then the rates that might be available. So that's the process that we've gone through. The other point that's maybe worthy of note, sometimes there is a misunderstanding in terms of the loan rate, in that many will equate the loan to what they're familiar with a mortgage, which typically have a longer term but shorter cycles that get renewed, 5 years or things of that nature. In this case, the interest rate is fixed for the full term for 31 and a half years. And as noted in the report, the city does have the ability to pay off the loan early if we desire have the funds to do that, which would reduce the total interest paid over the course of the term.
Thank you for that. One last question, and I'll have some closing comments. On the background section, to repeat, it talks about us as a council agreeing to the funding formula for the new stadium. That happened in January 20th, 2013. In November 6th of last year, we provided authority to the Deputy City Manager to go to the market to do what we have for us tonight. Why tonight? Why now? Why not in December or earlier in January?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, as I mentioned, basically is based on the markets themselves in terms of timing. We do have some requirements through the further stages of this project. The construction arrangements will require some milestone payments, so we'll have requirements of cash during the next number of years, but there is some flexibility, of course, in terms of our timing, and the primary factor that caused us to go at this point in time is based on the interest rate, and it's favorable for us.
Thank you for that. Mr. Deputy Mayor, just a couple of comments. I, of course, rise in support of this report. It is exactly what we asked to be done. We asked for the Deputy City Manager to do the due diligence for us, to come back with a recommendation on the best timing for the best interest rate on this loan. And that's been done. That's the view of the administration and the recommendation. We've not delegated the authority to anyone. This council, by way of bylaw, later this evening, will be determining and making that final decision ourselves. Under our Cities Act and other legislation, we cannot delegate that authority, and we have not done that. It's important to know that this level of debt, $100 million, is different than the debt that is referred to on page 2 of the report. And I'll say it's different in a significant way, because we have, as you know, the tax on each ticket at the stadium of $12, which is a dedicated source of revenue for this loan. We're not depending upon the general revenue of the city to do this by way of taxes. It is by those who use the facility. That was understood at the very beginning of the agreement itself between the three partners, that's the way it's going to be here tonight. So I'm excited because this means this is moving forward on the last bits and pieces to do before we actually begin the construction of this fantastic facility later this year. And it was just a question of timing as to when this came forward, but we had already approved this by way of motions of council. Nothing new, nothing surprising here at all. Just that we got a very good interest rate, and we have that locked in for 31 and a half years. So I want to thank the administration and the work they did to do this, to see this through. And I'm hoping members of council will unanimously agree to this funding. I want to look at the page 2 on the amount of debt that we have here, and members will see this. While we may have a debt limit of $450 million, I want to be clear here that our debt today is substantially lower than that. And if I can draw people again to the bottom of page 2, we have a current debt of $56 million on our water and sewer utility debt, general debt of $21 million, and we have a servicing agreement credits from the creeks at $1 million, and general committed capital borrowing in the 2010, 11, and 12 budgets, and uncommitted utility borrowing at $23 million. So that's $116 million that we have. But with the RRI Stadium, it's 216, substantially lower than the $450 million. Now, we will be using other debt in the future, but today, I think this is, you can see very clearly this is for infrastructure. The current debt of $116 million is for infrastructure, pipes in the ground, expanding our city, and growth. The difference on the RRI is it's treated differently because it's paid for by users of the facility. Very different. I'm very, very pleased to support this report. I will be supporting the bylaw that comes forward tonight as the act of actually accepting the terms as proposed by the administration, and ask members of council to support it as well. It's a great night for our city, a great night for the growth of our city into the future. Thank you. Other speakers on the report? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also rise in support of this in support of this loan. I think that as you pointed out, the rate is very favorable. Indeed, one of the most favorable rates that I could ever remember in my lifetime. I think it is important that it's paid for out of ticket sales. I noted the 31.5 year time line for paying it off. In fact, I've noted in my other reading that the ticket sales estimates on which that number is based were cautious, and it's my belief, in fact, that we'll be able to pay off this loan early. So a very good loan at a very good rate that can be paid off early, and the good prospect of ticket sales, I think, is an excellent deal.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other comments on the report? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question to the administration. Sometimes when you have a mortgage, for instance, and you pay it off early, there's a penalty. So my question is this agreement on this loan such that if we pay it off early, there are no penalties involved?
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, that's my understanding as well, that in this case it's been structured on that basis, that there are no penalties, that we do have that ability to pay things off, which would reduce the interest rate overall. And the second question is, will there be other uses of that facility that will also bring in revenue that might be applied to that loan as well?
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, the overall financial model for the facility, of course, has a number of revenue sources that deal with both the repayment of debt, such as this report is considering. The unique feature of this debt is that user fees are going directly to repay the loan. In addition, there are other expenditures over the course of 30 years for maintenance costs and various other things that will go into the overall project. So we've kind of thought about this in a very long-term context, both in terms of dealing with the debt to support the facility, but obviously maintenance and other asset management requirements in the overall financial model. Identifying the revenue sources that have been committed to date will cover that.
And then my last statement is that if we are able to put money aside for maintenance of that infrastructure over a long period of time, maintenance and renewal, then it will not become an infrastructure issue such as some of the issues that we have now. Is that true?
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, that is true. That is our plan. We have looked at typical maintenance rates on facilities like this as we have the opportunity to work through the rest of the stages in terms of finalizing the design, understanding the various components that will go into the building. There'll be future work to establish maintenance schedules and provide further detail on the costing and when, so that as planned here, there is money currently set aside, and we can time that appropriately to have those things done as needed. And the goal here is that in 30 years, the facility looks as near as new as day one, and that in fact we believe this facility certainly should have a much longer life than 30 years, and part of that is making sure we take care of it along the way.
Thank you, Mr. Schoberg. I will be supporting this, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a few thoughts I'd like to share. First off, we've mentioned a few times that this is there's something to do with the province here. I think it should be clear that while the municipal board, we're boring through them, it's actually not their loan. For sure, it's the city's loan, and all the rest that comes along with that is the city's risk. Maybe they help us fill out the paperwork, whatever, but there's no provincial partnership in the risk sense for this. It's completely on the city's shoulders. Second off, when we voted on this a year ago, what was part of the presumed payment was a 30-year term at 3.5%. Right now we're looking at a 31.5-year term at 3.99%. It doesn't sound like much difference, but actually the interest difference over the term of 31 and a half years will be over $14 million. So this is quite a different scenario in some respect to what we voted on last year. Third point is that by my math, $12 a ticket times 28,000 tickets, a game times 10 Rider home games times 31.5 years equals just over $100 million, about $106 million. The issue, though, unfortunately, that this money, there's interest on this. So by my calculation, actually, the real cost of this loan is going to be over $175 million. Of course, the interest calculator that I could use online was for mortgages, and you can only do it by monthly payments. And I know here we're paying biannually. So could you just comment on what the actual whole cost of this is and where the extra money is going to come from?
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, as noted, I believe the overall cost is probably in that range in terms of both principal and interest. Our estimates were that the difference between the rate previously and this one is in the range of $13 million difference over the course of the timeline. There are a few areas. Of course, the business model that was presented last January is done, of course, before we've built anything. There are a number of assumptions in that model that we've laid out. Not all of those will come true, of course, but what we've tried to do is be more conservative in terms of our estimates. So that's one area that we've factored in. So there are opportunities in terms of the various line items, both on a revenue and a cost side, that there can be both positive variances as well as negative ones, such as this. There are also various other revenue streams over the course of time that may present themselves and be available in terms of lease revenues, potentially. Of course, we see the opportunity for other teams to participate at the facility, semi-professional soccer as an example. There could be various other uses. We certainly intend the facility to be a year-round multi-use facility, so it will generate additional revenues from that perspective. In addition to things such as in our estimates, we included 10 games per year in our estimate of facility fee revenues. We know on a periodic basis there are playoff games as well as Grey Cup games at the facility. Those things will factor in. as well as various other events, concerts and other things that may generate revenue streams. In addition, on the expenditure side, as I say, we've tried to be conservative in our estimates, so maintenance costs and things of that nature will have a better sense once the facility is designed and constructed. But again, believe there's some room for us over the course of time to deal with the variances here. And in addition, of course, we think the overall ticket sales are likely higher than what we've estimated. To the extent that we can pay the loan off early, it will reduce the total interest cost over that time.
Okay, I appreciate your optimism. I'll say that given that the interest rate's nearly the same price, at least 3/4 of the same price of the $100 million covered by the ticket fee, I'm not as optimistic that we'll be paying this off one day sooner than 31 and a half years from now. Also, another thing I'd like to mention is that this ticket fee is a $12 fee per ticket that's actually replacing an existing maintenance fee. It has been $8. It is now $10, is my understanding. So while it's a real revenue for a city, in the same sense, it's also a loss of revenue of over half of that amount that would have been collected to look after our existing stadium, with that mechanism was already in place. One other point that, as far as the city's debt limit goes, this will only take us to $216 million, with a total debt cap of $450 million. But we need to keep in mind with the wastewater treatment plant that Boring will have to do around that, and other looming infrastructure issues, things we know about, and certainly things we have yet to know about. I personally am not, I don't quite know how we're going to stay under $450 million. I think at some point in the years to come that this is going to be a real issue. Either the city's going to have to borrow more money, or we're going to have to really adjust something significantly to avoid that. Of course, the only issue with borrowing money is the paying it back part. The borrowing part isn't so hard, but the problem is if we don't pay back, it's our future generations that have to do so. So this puts me in a bit of a moral crunch, because I actually don't want to vote for this tonight. The problem being that I do appreciate that you've negotiated a rate that's very timely. So I'm just curious, supposing that this wasn't a unanimous vote tonight, this was held up by a month, do we have a sense of how that might affect this interest rate?
Mr. Schulberg.
Your Worship, it's one of the factors going into the timing of this issuance of the loan. We obviously can't, with any guarantee, determine what the rate will be in the future, but the trends are up. So timing is good for us at this point in time. Pressure on interest rates typically is higher. But as I say, we can only go to market at certain points in time and get an assessment from the market. Okay, thank you. And if I could just have one last comment from the clerk, just about our ability as councillors to abstain from a vote. What's the process for that, and how would it affect a bylaw reading? Thanks.
Mr. Clerk.
I don't believe that there's anything prohibiting you from abstaining. I would ask Mr. Wary, the city solicitor, to add his comments on that.
Mr. Wary.
Your Worship, normally there's either a positive or negative vote on an issue before council. If a member of council wishes to abstain, there's an ability for that to occur.
A question on that point. Without having the bylaws in front of me, I had assumed that an abstention is like a negative. To be clear, is that the case, or can someone abstain and not have a vote, yes or no? To either the clerk or to the solicitor. Mr. Murray?
Your Worship, I'll review the Cities Act again to confirm that in advance of the matter being dealt with at the time that the vote is taken for the bylaw.
You'll look at it between now and the time the vote takes place? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Hinks.
Thank you. I'm excited about supporting this motion. I think it's a great day for Regina to get a new facility like this, and it's also it's also a great location when you think about it. It's to help with the exhibition, and all the other events that happen in the exhibition grounds. Football, high school football, minor football, soccer, Like I said, the exhibition and agribition, this place is going to be busy all the time. And as much as naysayers say about parking, there's lots of parking there. I mean, we have more parking probably than any stadium in the country when it's done.
Order from the gallery.
have him
No,
put out?
no
Did you have him
comments
put out?
from the gallery. Order. Councillor Hinks, you have the floor to speak of the issue, not address someone in the gallery. To the gallery, no more.
Oh, do you see that?
Mr. Novak, you can leave the chamber, please. You can leave the chamber, please. It is. You can leave the chamber, please. You can leave the chamber. You've been asked to leave. You've been shown disrespect to members of council and to the chair. You're out of the chamber, please. You will not be recognized as a delegation to speak. Mr. Novak, please leave. Mr. Novak, will you please leave the chambers? I'm asking you again. Order. There's no debating from the gallery. You've been asked to leave. Mr. Davies?
Mr. Mayor, if I could suggest a 5-minute recess while the deliberation is going on in
Motion
the
for 5-minute recess. Okay, another seconder, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 5-minute recess.
Of that money coming to us for maintenance stuff. We presently are putting out $1 million a year, or around $1 million a year in maintenance costs for the stadium we have now. We won't have to put that up with the new stadium. And anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hinks. Other speakers? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my pleasure to rise this evening in both being pleased and a little relieved that when I see big major projects like this moving through their life cycle, going from the feasibility design phase, getting more into the detailed design phase, that I certainly appreciate there's a magnitude of risks that can be associated, especially when you're trying to deal in the financial markets today and trying to predict interest rates. And I feel this proposal addresses two of the key concerns that I had a lot of discussions with residents before the stadium proposal. And that was basically, how can you guarantee that we'll get a 31-year or a 30-year interest rate locked in at a reasonable and respectable rate like 3.99%, given today's. And I think this proposal before us tonight gives us that opportunity to eliminate much of that risk and uncertainty that was involved when we first discussed this project back when it was a bit more at the conceptual stage. The second piece, too, was a lot of discussion, well, why don't the users that use the facility pay for it? And I think this is an example of the financing model that has been put into place for the stadium that actually brings that component in, that so many of now the users themselves are actually helping pay. So I think as we move forward on this project, this proposal tonight actually solidifies and puts into concrete documentation that I think the project's on track, on budget. Certainly there's been what I would consider a very minor change in the interest rate, but I think certainly from the overall kind of expectations that we had from that early discussion to where we are today, I'm very pleased. And certainly looking at all the discussions in the marketplace regarding the future of our financial markets, I don't think there's an economist out there knows where we're going to be, but it certainly seems that the trend is pointing towards interest rates going up. So I'd be very comfortable to vote in favor of this proposal and getting the project moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Other speakers before Councillor Donald? Do you want to close debate?
I do, please.
Okay, Councillor Donald.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I'm going to pick up on a comment that Councillor Burnett made at the end. It was called risk and certainty. I believe that when Mr. Schubert came before us, it was give or take a year ago, we talked about some of these plans. Do you recall that a year ago that the Canadian dollar was trading on par? And I ask you what the dollar is trading on now. So the difference is 10%. Yet before us we have a proposition that we can actually get a loan for 3.99% that is guaranteed for 31 and a half years. Now, that emits another emotion for me. Can you tell me the last time you sat in here and talked about a guarantee on anything? Because it doesn't happen. There are no guarantees in life, yet we have one before us, and so I think that speaks to itself. I think this is also an opportunity maybe to speak to the overall project, and so if you allow me, Your Worship, I'm going to ask some questions to the administration, in particular Mr. Schulberg. So one, simply put, at this point in time, what are some of the things that have happened so far with the stadium project, please?
Mr. Schulberg.
Your Worship, of course, many of you aware this project has been going on for better part of a couple of years now in terms of the review and establishment of a funding model with the province that led to decisions by council in terms of the portions that the city is responsible for and as the owner of the facility, the overall plan. From there, of course, we've moved into the procurement process based on council's direction, have undertaken a request for qualifications process that shortlisted to 3 teams. We had significant interest in the project on that basis, and those 3 have been participating in the RFP process that will lead to the selection of 1 here in 2014 for construction later this spring. Along the way, we have engaged advisors on many of the factors to help us with various issues moving into it, and certainly outside of the stadium, there's a vision and plans, consistent with our with council's vision for the community that will follow on some of this work.
Thank you. Now, Your Worship, I'm wondering if I drove past the site on Elphinstone, what would I see and what wouldn't I see right now? Again, compared to perhaps a few months ago.
Your Worship, another good point is there's been a significant amount of activity going on that particular site, and that activity this year has been in preparation for the stadium, so clearing the site, providing the various utility services and other things that are required there, demolition of buildings and various other processes happening there. That work is basically right on track, so that when a final proponent is selected, they'll have a clear site to move forward with. That activity was done in conjunction with and around the various activities going on at the site. So we've had a few larger events, some regular, some new, including Agribition and Grey Cup as examples, where the folks have been able to continue their work while keeping those activities underway and resulting in a positive experience for many, and at the same time keeping the community informed of the various activities going on and getting their input and understanding their issues so that we can address them as we go.
Thanks very much. I'm wondering, Your Worship, what this $100 million will allow us to do next.
Mr. Schulberg.
Your Worship, this is certainly one of the key elements of the funding model for the overall stadium. We do have other funding sources, some city-directed, other ones very specifically with the province through a grant funding arrangement, as well as with Sask Sport as a key tenant in the facility. The riders as well. We have established an agreement with the riders for their tenancy, along with their sponsorship support of the facility. So a number of the major funding components are now in place with this loan, and I expect over the next period of time, one of the next things that will be happening is, in terms of the funding side of it, is the sponsorship program that the riders will be undertaking with the community.
Thank you. And just on this line, Your Worship, I just ask a follow-up because it's probably the question that most people want to understand. And so if we, in fact, continue to go down the financial path that we are, when do we see either a hole in the ground or a picture of a stadium or a understanding of that process, please?
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, we should expect to see that happen for this construction season, so this spring upcoming. Once we have selected a final proponent, there are also some steps in terms of legal agreement work, some financing that they'll be required to do on their part before they can put a shovel in the ground, but expect that this spring. And all this is to say as well that very consistent with our plan overall. So we are right in track with the early 2017 opening of the facility.
Thank you very much. Your Worship, I'll summarize by saying this. One, all of the key partners, the province, the Rough Riders, and so far the City of Regina, has been forthright in what they're trying to do and what they will do. This is just simply a timing issue. This is something that was agreed to before. I believe that the amount of money was exactly what we had talked about. The interest rate is market-driven, and I think still very fair. And to know that it is guaranteed for 31 and a half years to me is absolutely wonderful. Further to that, I think that you can see that there's a plan in place that we have partners that are doing their due diligence as well. I look forward to the next part, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. I'll call a question on the report to you close debate. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Bylaws. Councillor Fraser? I understand you may want to move the first 5 bylaws and separate the last bylaw on the stadium funding. Is that right?
That's exactly it. Thank you.
Okay. Just so before you start, I just want to go on a procedure issue.
Sure.
Councillor Fraser, you asked about the ability to abstain, and I'm going to refer to the Cities Act, Section 72.3. It says if a member is not required to abstain from voting on a matter before council and abstain from voting, the member is deemed to have voted in the negative.
Okay.
So on the purpose of the bylaw, if you abstain, it's considered a negative, and the consequences would be quite significant.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Fraser.
Okay. Sorry. Do we need a motion to separate the bylaws, or
no? We don't.
Okay. So I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaws 2014-2, 2014-3, 2014-4, 2014-5, and 2014-6 be introduced and read for a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. City Council has given first readings to bylaws 2014-2, 214-3, 214-4, 214-5, and 214-6. Prior to any debate on second reading, I invite members of the public that are present here in the council chamber who wish to address City Council related to any of these 5 bylaws to indicate their desire.
Mr. Mayor, I rise on a point of order. I'm wondering if one of the bylaws, bylaw number 2014-4, which incorporates the provision for the Harbour Landing lane
That's absolutely correct. We would have to remove that one. That's absolutely correct. Yes, that's absolutely correct. Councillor Fraser, you could perhaps move to table that bylaw.
Okay. If I could move to table bylaw 2014-4.
Yes, I totally forgot about that. So thank you for that. On the tabling motion, all those in favor? Against? Carried. Okay.
Okay.
Just we'll continue on. Thank you for that, Councillor Hawkins.
Back to my invitation to members of the public who wish to speak to the bylaws that were mentioned previously. Now is your opportunity to indicate your desire to address council. I see no one, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second reading.
Okay. I move, seconded by Councillor Hinks, that bylaw 2014-2, 2014-3, 2014-5, and 2014-6 be read a second time.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that Council hereby consent to bylaws 14-2, 14-3, 14-5, and 14-6 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously.
Okay, I move, seconded by Councillor Fundura, that bylaws 14-2, 14-3, 14-5, and 14-6 be read for a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Hinks, do you want to handle 14-9?
I'm proud and excited to move seconded by City Councillor Young, that bylaw 2014-9 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. City Council has given first reading to bylaw 2014-9. Prior to any debate on second reading, I invite members of the public that are present here in the council chamber who wish to address City Council related to this bylaw to indicate their desire at this time. I see no one, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Burnett, that bylaw 2014-9 be read a second time.
Questions or comments on the bylaw? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that Council hereby consents to bylaw 2014 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? All those in favor? Oh, this is the reading. Would you have? All those opposed? It's carried unanimously. Councillor Hinks.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaw 2014 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Fraser, your negative votes are registered. Thank you. With that, we will move on to administration reports. City Manager's Report 14-2. We need a mover of that one. Councillor O'Donnell.
I will bring this forward. So the number is CM 14-2, and it is 1801 Scar Street. Removal of caveat. This refers to the purchase of the Globe Theater, building that the Globe Theater's housed in. From time ago, there was caveat placed on that boat. We wanted to make sure that a couple of organizations who looked after it was clean. Caveat has one of those. Now that the Globe has a tax ownership arrangement and they are looked after the building, this thing is no longer needed, and so we're looking to let it go away.
A seconder, please. Councillor Young. Councillor Fraser, can you take the chair for a moment, please?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. This is a very good news story. While the mechanism to remove a caveat is a legal requirement, as the report states, what we see here is a significant partnership with the community to assist in the Globe Theatre in remaining at its current location with a theatre in the round. And I was fortunate to be at the announcement of the purchase of that property by those investors on behalf of the Globe Theatre. I can tell you there's a great deal of excitement that we're going to keep the theater downtown at the old City Hall, a beautiful building that really will be the centerpiece and is one of the centerpieces of our city for downtown. So I'm extremely excited about that. And, of course, in many ways, the City of Regina is a partner with the Globe Theatre, has been in the past, and will continue to be in the future. So while the report does speak of a rather technical legal requirement to remove that caveat, what that means is that this very exciting project will take another step forward to reality. So very, very pleased to see this, and I'm sure members of council will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as a side note, the city really came to the aid of the Globe Theatre. I happened to be the chair of the board when this happened. And at the time the building was going to be sold, and it was possible that whoever bought the building could tell the Regina Plains Museum and the Globe Theatre to find other quarters. And so this caveat that was put on, or the lien that was put on the selling of that building worked very well for quite a few number of years. And so I'm sure that at that time the Globe Board was very thankful to the city for putting the lien on, and now they're very thankful if the city will remove the lien so that they can buy their own building. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Fraser.
In the first place, for the past few decades, there's been a caveat that the private individual who owned the building couldn't sell it, couldn't kick the Globe Theatre out. It's good that the Globe owns this building now. My only question is, I think there's some inherent value in this building as a heritage building, and by us removing this caveat, do we somehow lose control of this building staying erect? I imagine, the Globe right now will want to put some more money into it. It's hard to know in decades down the road what the plan will be. So, do we have any controls over, trying to keep this building as a heritage building? Thanks.
I believe it's a heritage building, and they have to abide by those regulations. But I will ask members of the administration, Mr. Carlson, to give details. Mr. Carlson.
Your Worship is correct. Heritage building, and we would maintain any type of heritage oversight on that. And just aware of some of the preliminary plans of the Globe Theatre, I think they'd be looking to invest in the building, so it'll be a positive.
Okay, thanks. That's my understanding too. I think this is a good move then. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers? I'm going to call the question on the report. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. City Manager's Report 14.3, severance approval. A motion from the City Manager for the City Manager's Report. Councillor O'Donnell.
Your Worship, I just took my time getting up there because this is not from Planning Commission, but it kind of falls under the old auspices of Planning Commission. So
I might, Councillor O'Donnell, just a moment. You have a revised copy in front of you as well.
I do. That
was received, not the one you had in the original.
Yep.
Of course, this has been a new one.
Yep.
Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. So the application is for a severance approval, 2205 Francis Street. So what this is, do I need a seconder for this?
You do. Seconder.
I'll second it.
Councillor Hinks.
So I'm going to read what the recommendation is, and that this application to sever Lot 1 into proposed lots, and their number now 25 and 26, Block 63, Plan DV 270, being 2205 Francis Street, be denied. So the first thing is, how many times do we ever come forward here with a denial? So that will catch your attention right away. And the simple notion here is that there's one lot, and the people want to divide it into two. But under our current situation, our current bylaw, there is not enough property to divide into two, build the buildings, and have enough gap between the two. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'll ask the administration why they would bring forward a denial at this time, and perhaps just a little explanation as to what could happen next.
Mr. Carlson, of course, this will apply to the next report as well, so this is timely. Mr. Carlson?
Absolutely, Your Worship. Thank you. From time to time, you do see these severance applications come directly to Council. So the legislation currently directs the administration that if there's a subdivision or a simple severance, as this is, just a one lot into two, doesn't comply with the subdivision bylaw, or if it doesn't comply with the zoning bylaw in terms of setbacks and lot frontage, as we have here today, that the administration and Council have no choice but to deny the application. Now, the remedy or the opportunity for the applicant is to take that application to the Development Appeals Board to see if they can get a variance or a waiver of that development standard to something less. And what happened in this situation, Council some time ago denied a request for severance regarding a setback, for a side yard setback, and Council denied that. They went to Development Appeals Board, and that was also denied at the Development Appeals Board. So the applicant has revised their severance to a different severance, and now they need a variance of the front yard width, the frontage width. And so we need to bring this to Council to be denied for their opportunity to go to the Development Appeals Board again. So Development Appeals could either approve it, and then the subdivision could happen, or if they deny it again, then the applicant will have to come up with a different plan for their site.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
So if I could, I will make a personal opinion. It's an odd circumstance to have to come before us, say no, but by the way, go somewhere else, see if they'll agree to you, and then come back. So this is one of those things where there is oversight, and you will see this again if there is approval from another body. But I also would suggest to you that why I like what is being said here is that we have rules, they're not being followed, and you can't have your way. They had a chance to change that. They looked at it differently, and we're still not meeting the rules, and we're saying no. So in that regard, I would like you to agree that we deny this, but I still have trouble with the whole process. So,
thank you, Councillor Donald. Other comments on this report? It's all pretty clear. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we're on to report 14-44. Sorry, that's also a severance application. Councillor Donald. A seconder, please.
so also be denied, and based on the same discussion that we had on the floor here a minute ago, also seek approval, please.
Questions or comments on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We now move to committee reports. Executive Committee. Councillor Fraser on appointments to the Warehouse District Improvement District. What's your report? I'd like to introduce the report.
Sure, I'd like to introduce reports, CR 14-3.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, just if you can introduce the recommendations, if you don't mind, Councillor Fraser. Not coming through well.
Test.
There it
okay,
is.
Great. Yeah, so this report is appointments to Regina Warehouse Business Improvement District Board. The names being put forward are terms effective from January 1st, 2014, ending December 31st, 2015. Four names are James Dupuy, James Yolick, Donald Black, and Jesse Chatterson.
Okay, that's good. That's for Executive Committee. Questions or comments on this report? Do you have any comments, Councillor Fraser, on this?
Not particularly. You know, I think our business improvement districts seem to be a very effective tool. You know, they're able to leverage local business tax to spend in their area, and I think the warehouse district has a lot of potential as our city continues to grow. It's one area of infill that there's lots of room for improvement, and so far so good. I think these names will be a strong addition. Thanks.
And I think these are three very good appointments as well. So, okay. I'll call the question on this report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll go to report 14-4. Councillor Fraser, once again, appointments to tabled appointments, citizens.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to introduce report CR 14-4, and this is citizen appointments for 2014. This includes, my apologies here, Mr. Alex Taylor, Paul Barassa, and Jim Kilkenny be nominated to the Regina Airport Authority. That Ms. Renu Kapoor and Sean Quinlan be appointed to the Regina Public Library Board. That Brian Harris and Ian Lucan be appointed to the Development Appeals Board. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's good. Comments on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. CR 14-5, Councillor Fraser. It's a supplemental report on procedure bylaw review.
Actually, can I ask someone else to introduce this?
I guess, yes. Someone else would like to do that?
Do you mind?
Councillor Hinks wants to
Move it.
You move a concurrence in the report. Speakers on this report. Councillor Fraser.
Great. Yeah, I rise to speak against this, actually. My specific issue is with the matter of written submissions. I think this report suggests that we keep the status quo, that we make people submit written submissions to present to council. That's actually not the norm in Canada. Lots of places, depending on the size of the city, there's different rules to follow. But for most cities our size, most of real life isn't scripted, obviously, and when people want to come to present in the public forum, they don't have to do so. To me, personally, that would be a step in the right direction here. That's not what this report suggests. And also, this report suggests limiting citizens' time from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. I guess my thought of this, I think the technical bit of that, it's not so much that 5 minutes isn't enough for people. I think, we have lots of reports here, and lots of times it doesn't go over 5 minutes. There's always a chance for us to ask questions. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is sort of the spirit behind it, that right now citizens have 10 minutes. We're taking something away from them, and I don't really feel like their, rights and responsibilities sort of go together. We're taking a right away from people, but we're not reducing their responsibility, or we're not issuing them a new right. So personally, that doesn't really just sit well with me. I think we sort of have hopefully sort of the more open a government is, the more able it is to sort of serve a city well, and this sort of seems like a step in the wrong direction to me. So I won't be supporting this report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to answer both concerns that Councillor Fraser has raised. First of all, I think there's much merit in presenting a written submission. It enables councillors to read the submission in advance, to formulate questions, to think about the points that are being raised. It also, the person that writes the report is able to organize their thoughts in presenting the report. I also want to address the question of time. I don't think that this is an anti-democratic measure. I don't think that this reduces citizens' access to council at all. I note that Saskatoon has a 5-minute speaking limit. Currently, as I speak to you now, I'm on a 5-minute speaking limit. You can say what you want to say if you say it succinctly in 5 minutes. Also, I note that there is a discretion to increase the time if it's necessary, and importantly, there's opportunity for councillors to ask questions of the Speaker, of the delegation, so that all of that, I think, that means that there's generous input, a generous opportunity for input from citizens, as there should be. I note again, written submission, you're able to speak to the motion extemporaneously, you're able to receive questions from councillors. I think this is a reasonable way for council to proceed in an orderly fashion to do its business in a city that's becoming increasingly busy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other speakers on this? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. I just a question of the clerk first. When someone puts in their written submission, is there a length set to that, either pages or time?
Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Your Worship. No, I think it basically runs the gamut of if you can speak to your report in the current form verbatim, word for word, it has to be done within 10 minutes.
And I think notice is given to the person. You have like 1 minute left on your time period, and they do summations from there.
Yep. No, and I understand that part. I was more looking at, so when we received the written report, which we received the Friday before council, currently, it is set at a certain length in terms of reading time, and that is 10 minutes. So does that change in the future? So in other words, when someone provides a written commentary, is it in fact to that kind of length, or is it a 5-minute written length? Or is that stated?
Through Your Worship, that isn't stated. It's my understanding from your discussions on this that the whole process of trying to decrease the amount of time was not in any way meant to take away from the person who submitted their report. It was rather to afford them an opportunity to speak off the cuff. Maybe they learned something over the weekend, but most importantly to get to the point succinctly. I don't think there's anything really against if they wanted to send more and more information in, but they know that they will not be given any more than 5 minutes to address you.
Thanks for that. So my point is simply this, as we currently operate, people have the ability to create a submission for us, which we get 3 days in advance and gives us a chance to read. Currently what happens is they take that same submission, stand before us as a delegation, and read that same submission. And only when it comes to questions of a delegation are they able to, in fact, elaborate on that. What I'm looking at from this point of view is that you could put a written submission in, I'll call it 10 minutes in length, that I could read ahead of time. But when you stand here as a delegation, your 5 minutes, in fact, allows you to be more succinct, make your key points. In fact, move away from that if things have changed over the weekend. In fact, you might have, in fact, got 15 minutes of time now with us as a council. And so I would be looking for some clarity in terms of length of submission. And I simply say it from this point of view. 400 to 500 pages from 20 delegations going into a meeting would seem to be a little onerous and not fair. I suggest that we keep that 10-minute, if it was to be read, 10-minute in length, I would add that, and then there is the 5-minute submission. No different than a previous speaker, I gave great thought to this, but I like the idea very much that we in fact have elaborated in terms of time on what people, if you take my suggestion. And second of all, we also have the chance here to engage in people with questions, and I think that's incumbent upon us to do so. I've also noted no matter who it is when they come before us, and I mean that, no matter who it is, most people get rather nervous standing in front of either us or cameras or media or whatever it happens to be. And so I think the idea of the written submission, to me, probably is a great way to help things get organized and help them do their job. So with my suggestion, and I'll leave it as a suggestion for now, of that approximate 10 minutes in length, then I would like to support this.
Councillor Fraser, you only speak once on a report, I'm sorry. Other speakers on this report? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question. When people turn their paper in or their remarks to us, do they do it electronically or paper or both?
Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Your Worship, we get them in both forms.
In both forms, okay. Because there is no length that is established for the written report, people then could give us more information than they might normally give us, and they could also provide links to other sites or to research. Do they ever do that?
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe there have been occasions when people have provided links in their materials. Certainly we get presentations run the gamut from very brief, couple of paragraphs, to somebody who provides an extensive bibliography.
Okay, so then if that is the case, then I see this as actually being more useful and helpful to members of the public, because there's 3 ways that they'll be interacting with us. The first is that they can send in the written paper either in paper format or electronically with any links or any research they choose to add to it. The second is that they have the opportunity to do a 5-minute summary, and it's been my experience over the last year that some of the best interchange we have with members of the public is when we ask them questions, which means they can provide other information or do the summary statement. So they have that opportunity. They also then have the opportunity to answer any questions that we might put forward. So I see this as really an expansion of opportunity for the public to give us information that they would like us to hear, and to be able to talk about it in a more informal manner, which I think would be much easier. Some people had great difficulty reading through the 10 minutes, and so I think this lifts that from anyone who's going to present. So I think it's much better for public input.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other speakers? I know you want to speak, Councillor Fraser. You can't speak in a second time. Only once on a motion, I'm sorry. It's not a debate. You can ask for clarification, but it can't be a debate. Clarification, Councillor Fraser, but only asking clarification.
Asking clarification. Councillor Donald mentioned if something changed over the weekend. And it's my understanding how this is written that this isn't the case. You can summarize what you submit, but it's not that you can have a free conversation as you can in Saskatoon. It's a summary of what you submit. So I just want to be clear about that.
You're debating the issue, but I think it's that if you read in the paper something that adds to your issue, you can speak to that issue, not be stuck to the words in the paper. You can amplify. That's what it means. If you hear something over that you didn't think about before, you're able to do that. Now you can't do it. You must stick with the text as presented. So you're given more flexibility. Councillor Fraser, you can't debate this, okay? So we're going to have to go on the vote. I'm going to call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next report is our motions. And I'm going to have to ask Councillor Fraser to take my seat, if you wouldn't mind, so I get myself organized here for this.
floor is yours. No.
I have a motion I'd like to put before Council on its development of a long-term federal plan to fix Canada's housing crunch. If I have a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Hinks. I'll read the motion. It's long, but this is actually a motion that has been approved in various forms, but essentially the same in 139 other cities across the country. Whereas a stable and secure housing system that creates and maintains jobs and allows for a range of living options is essential for attracting new workers, meeting the needs of young families, and supporting seniors and our most vulnerable citizens, and whereas the high cost of housing is the most urgent financial issue facing Canadians, with 1 in 4 people paying more than they can afford for housing, and mortgage debt held by Canadians standing now just over $1.1 trillion. And whereas housing costs and, as the Bank of Canada notes, household debt are undermining Canadians' personal financial security while putting our national economy at risk. And whereas those who cannot afford to purchase a home rely on the short-term supply of rental units, which is driving up rental costs and making it difficult for house workers in regions experiencing strong economic activity. And whereas an inadequate supply of subsidized housing for those in need is pushing some of the most vulnerable Canadians onto the street, while $1.7 billion annually in federal investments in social housing have begun to expire, and whereas a coordinated action is required to prevent housing issues from being offloaded onto local governments and align the steps of local governments have already taken with regard to federal, provincial, and territorial programs and policies, whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has launched a housing campaign fixing Canada's housing crunch, calling on the federal government to increase housing options for Canadians and to work with all levels of government to develop a long-term plan for Canada's housing future, and whereas SCM has asked member municipalities to pass a resolution supporting the Fix Canada's Housing Crunch campaign, and whereas the City of Regina is continuing housing needs, such as a lack of supply of rental and affordable housing and vacancy rates lower than 3%, that can only be met through the sufficient financial resources, programs, policies, and long-term planning and investment made possible by federal leadership. Therefore, be it resolved that Council endorses the FCM housing campaign and urges the Minister of Employment and Social Development to develop a national long-term plan for housing that puts core investments on solid ground, increases predictability, protects Canadians from planned expiration of the $1.7 billion in social housing agreements, and ensures a healthy housing stock of affordable housing for Canadians. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Minister noted above, to the Minister of Social Services responsible for the Saskatchewan Housing Corporation, to the Saskatchewan Members of Parliament, to the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association, and the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. Mr. Deputy Mayor, this, as I said, is a significant milestone for us through FCM. It is, as a member of the Big City Mayor's Caucus of FCM, we've met a couple of times, and really the top issue facing FCM, along with infrastructure, is housing, and this encapsulates the concern that we have. So this came through our Housing Commission last week, and it was unanimously approved by the Housing Commission for consideration tonight at Council. And time is of the essence. The federal budget is being put together, and of course we suspect it will likely be tabled sometime in March. And the voices of Canadian municipalities around the country is important. As I mentioned, we'll be the 140th municipality to approve this. 139 have before, everywhere from Vancouver to Toronto to Windsor to Calgary, North Vancouver, Victoria Halifax have all approved a variation of this motion. The only difference that we have is the bottom of the first page of this motion, as it is in this report, where we talk of Regina needs and our issue of the 3% vacancy rate, but the rest remains the same. We're at a point where the federal government appears to be moving away from its long-term commitment. It has about $1.7 billion, as mentioned here, in social housing. Those agreements are set to expire, and many Canadians around the country are facing a very serious issue with their housing. And is when we speak with one voice as a municipality to ensure that the federal government continues with those agreements and extends them, absolutely critical. Now, later this week, there's going to be a meeting about homelessness and talking about its effect on our municipalities. I'll be attending that, as I believe Councillor Young, Councillor Fraser, others may be attending that. That's an important discussion. That is the beginning of another agreement the federal government has on homelessness, but not on social housing overall. There is a clear lack of vision and support for municipalities. And as you'll note on one of the whereas clauses, we need coordinated action nationally to prevent housing issues to be downloaded to that level of government least able to afford housing, and that is the municipalities. We partner, we work as we can, but we are not the front line for funding of this kind of issue that is so important to the fabric and growth of our country. So we want to show common purpose. We want to show agreement with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Big City Mayors Caucus. I would ask members of council to please support this. This is a strong voice to the federal government to not abdicate its responsibilities, to not move away from its funding models, to ensure that we have adequate housing for all Canadians. Thank you. Speakers on the motion. Councillor O'Donnell.
Your Worship, I just want to follow up a little bit with what you had to say.
I hear you all the way over here.
I got my gym voice on. Okay. So if you recall, back in November I was on Parliament Hill, and on your behalf, and I'm using that phrase on purpose, and I'll explain that in a minute. On your behalf, I visited with our local MPs, and the message was clearly about housing. When I finished that meeting, I sent them each a letter, a card, thanking them for visiting, but also asked them specifically, would they ask the finance minister to please follow up with housing and make sure that's part of their mandate. So I'm pleased that in this motion that the Mayor and the Housing Commission has noted that we would send this motion to all of those people and to some others. I think that's key. Remind them that we, in fact, are a unified voice. The reason that is important is because we have consistently said on the floor of this council that the federal government has a role to play in housing. And we have been, at times, not welcomed by some people who think that, well, no, you just got to take it over. We don't have the funds, we don't have the ability, and they have the resources to make those things happen. I get a little worried about debt reduction when it comes to trade-offs in housing, but that's another issue. So I think this is very important. The reason that we got nationally exposure on infrastructure and money for infrastructure is because we stood together in all communities, large and small, and make sure the federal government understood this. This is extremely important. I ask this to be unanimous with vote, please.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser? You may want to use the other one again.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to speak in favor of this. FCM has done good work on the infrastructure file, and I think hopefully this is what happened next. So I've noted, I guess, that the feds not only have to do something, they have to actually turn about 180 degrees. There's a lot of housing infrastructure mortgages coming up to term here in the coming years that they don't have a plan to refund. So to be clear, this is a long road. It's hopeful that something will happen quickly, but definitely it's a turn of direction that needs to happen for the federal government. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Two motions. Both of these motions are referral motions. There's no debating it. We'll just have Councillor O'Donnell introduce them. Councillor O'Donnell.
If I could introduce and get a seconder, I'll read the motion.
Seconder, please.
Thanks very much. So this is on off-leash dog parks, and the motion reads as follows. Whereas Regina is a growing community with an increasing dog population, and whereas while Regina currently has a very good off-leash park, and there are ongoing plans for additional off-leash parks, and whereas Regina will soon be adding whole new neighborhoods, it is anticipated the demand for new parks will come with increased expectations to accommodate the growing dog population. Therefore, be it resolved that the administration prepare a report for City Council through the Regina Planning Commission that outlines the city's ability to require an off-leash park, that is, dog park specifically, and each new development that has a population of 5,000. I just want to say a couple of things, if I could, as clarity. The number 5,000 was pulled out of a hat. That doesn't mean very much to me, but the idea is there's got to be a sweet spot where this becomes real. Second part of it is in other jurisdictions, not every dog park is miles long and miles wide. In fact, what they have is dog parks that are, in fact, right beside children's playgrounds that are fenced in gated areas, and the dogs can socialize and do their business. So I'm not looking for huge tracts of land to take away from our open spaces, but I believe that this is something in terms of practical nature we need to look at. I'll look for your support.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Other speakers on? Oh, I guess it's not debatable. Any questions for clarification? I have two questions of the administration to clarify this. We have another dog park that we asked to be set aside in the northeast part of the city that has not been utilized. What is the status of that? Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, I am familiar that land has been set aside. I'm not familiar with the status right now, but I can undertake
part of this report that comes back?
Council. Absolutely.
And to Councillor Dowell, you're assuming that there's going to be some form of public consultation that would allow people to express their perspective on location, space, areas, those kinds of issues. What will come back? Councillor Dowell?
Yes, Your Worship, that is my intent. In fact, you'll note that I didn't put a date on it. And so while I would suggest that I'd be happy if it come back in the fall, I would suggest that between not only developers and the community and so on, I would hope that there'd be some engagement for that to work, please.
Is the fall adequate time to the administration, Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you for that. Okay. This is a referral motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. As is the next one, Councillor O'Donnell.
So this one is on residential recycling, and if I could have a seconder, I will read.
Okay.
Have a seconder, thank you. Whereas Regina is well into its first year of residential recycling program, and whereas one of the goals of the recycling program is to reduce the amount of waste going to the landfill, and whereas a second goal is to increase awareness as to what products may be recycled and for the need to reduce waste, and whereas during Council's initial consideration of the recycling program, concern was expressed as to the need to also provide incentives to residents in an effort to help reduce the amount of waste placed out for pickup each week. And whereas under the current collection system, an individual household may not acquire an additional bin or reduce the size of their current bin. And whereas in some instances a household may or may not participate in regular weekly collection, and this reduction in service use is unrecognized in the program. Therefore, be it resolved that the administration provide a report to City Council via the Public Works Committee in September 2014 that provides options on the capability of the City of Regina to have the recycling program covered by an annual property tax and to charge solid waste collection to a fee-for-service use where residents have the option of choosing the size of bin they require. Be it further resolved that the report include the feasibility of providing the recycling collection on a weekly basis and the garbage collection on a biweekly system. Your Worship, I'll just make a couple of comments. I want to make sure that you understand that the overall goal that I have here is to do an assessment as to whether or not it is practical for us to move the cost of recycling into the tax dole and to charge for waste. That's my ultimate goal here, to provide an incentive so that we in fact increase the amount of recycling that we're doing and provide an incentive so that there is less waste going to the landfill. You will note that I talk about size of bin. I know that occurs in other jurisdictions. That to me is not a limiting factor. That is simply an option, as well as whether it is a weekly and so on collection. That to me is just part of the outline that I would like to have considered. That is not directional in this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. This is not debatable. Do we all understand the terms of the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Before we adjourn, Councillor Fraser, if you could introduce a motion that would clarify meetings next month with respect to a regular meeting of council and the other meeting related to budget. Councillor Fraser.
Great, thanks a lot. Yeah, I'd like to introduce a motion. So this next month will be our budget process. A draft of the budget will be made public on February 4th. Currently, our next scheduled council meeting is February 24th. It's a Monday. And I'd like to put a motion forward that we actually move the next regular council meeting from the 24th to the 27th so that we can incorporate a public hearing on the budget and hopefully pass the budget on the 24th. If not, then it would be passed on the 27th would be the presumption. But yeah, so if I could make a motion to move the next regular council meeting from Monday, February 4th to Thursday, February 27th. Sorry, Monday, February 24th to Thursday, February 27th. Thanks.
And the 24th would now be the regular council meeting.
24th would be a special budget meeting.
27th would be
27th would be a regular council meeting.
Right. Okay. Seconder for that. Councillor Young. Discussions on that motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Young, seconder, please. Councillor Frontier, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody. And, oh, Mr. Davies, you're waving. Would you like to speak before I adjourn?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I wouldn't normally share this information other than offline, but given that the public has suffered through the microphones just as much as you have, I just want to let everyone know that we do have new equipment arriving this week, which presumably will put an end to our travails related to communications in the HBH.
Thank you very much for that notice. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.